Weeks ago, we shared with you part of our recent chat with longtime Toledo radio newscaster London Mitchell on the airways for over half a century. Lon was told recently by national radio titan Cumulus that his services would no longer be needed. He shared that with us a couple of weeks ago. Well, we can now tell you that Lon is hosting his own interview gig on an internet station out of Grand Rapids, Towpath Radio. So today, the rest of our talk with London Mitchell, but I'm going to start with Lon replaying the story of his first encounter with local broadcast legend Bob Kelly, who, as you're about to learn, is a big part of the reason I became a broadcaster.
I got to tell you a story about Bob Kelly.
I love it.
First met Bob when I was in high school. My cousin was visiting from England. I took her to the old WTOD studios when they were doing rock and roll music. Bob was the morning disc jockey.
Mm-hmm.
And he invited us into the studio, was very, very accommodating, explained how radio worked to my cousin. She was incredibly impressed. And then the newscaster walked in, and it was time to do the news. And he sat in this big overstuffed chair with a microphone hanging in front of his face, and he started the news. And this was a guy named Bob Drake. News beat. And he's doing the news, and he comes to a story about a fire. Bob Kelly leans over the control board with his cigarette lighter and sets the news copy on fire. The newscaster doesn't miss a beat.
Mm-hmm.
As he's reading the stories, he's dropping the papers, his news copy, onto the floor, and he's stomping the fire out with his foot. I'm thinking to myself, this is a loony profession. You've got to be out of your mind to want to work with Bob Kelly.
It certainly helps. Kelly is probably the reason I got into this whole business. When he was at TOD, we had the morning paper out. Remember the Toledo Times? And TOD was there behind Southland Shopping Center. I lived a road over on Schneider. WTOD was a customer, and we felt, my brother and I had the route, we felt so invested because Bob did the thing where he would read the comic strip. It would end up being Mary Worth. People forget, great piece of trivia. He used to do Judge Parker, but he would basically read from the comic strip, describe the frame, the picture, and then of course make it his own story. And so we felt like, well, if we don't get snow, rain, whatever, if we don't get the paper to Bob, he can't do his show. And then I would go in there, Lon, to collect. And it was like $1.90 for the entire month. And as I tell people, I would go in, I'm collecting for the paper. And it would take 4 or 5 people. You got anything for them? Somebody throw in a quarter, somebody throw in a dime. And I tell people, I should have known right away, you probably aren't going to get real rich doing this. But I would stand there by that window and watch Lee Fowler and John Gary and those guys slip cue 45 RPM records and the same type of thing. I've got to do this. I want to do this. So I've told Kelly, I say, Bob, anytime people say, I don't like the way job you do on the news, I'm like, hey, I only got into this because of Kelly. Go talk to him.
But I wound up being his newscaster for longer than anybody else.
Years.
First at WTOD and then at WRQN.
Yeah.
And
Shores and Steel. I mean, those guys, just classic, successful broadcasters. I love about them that, like you, Lon Mitchell, talented enough, could have taken their trade to any market in the country, but they chose to work here. And the viewers, sometimes maybe we take things for granted. We're blessed to have had those types of folks in our market. Let's talk news for a second, then I'll get out of your hair, because in an era in which opinion and spin and disinformation masquerade as news, you have, Lon Mitchell, as the good ones do, just told the stories, given the facts, let the listeners take it in and weigh it all. And that I wanted to just applaud you on, because we're seeing less and less of that, I'm afraid.
And I think, first off, thank you very much. I really appreciate the comment, but I think we miss, and I know there are probably broadcast owners that would challenge me on this, but I think, Jerry, we really miss the fairness doctrine, which required broadcasters to tell both sides of the story, or give opportunity to both sides to have some time on the air to present opposing views. And I think, number one, we miss it. Number two, I think, is that cable news has become not necessarily so much news as what we might call opinion news, or news that focuses on a segment of the audience that reinforces maybe what you already are feeling comfortable believing.
Yep.
And you don't jump around. If you're a CNN fan, you're very unlikely to spend an equal amount of time with Fox News, for example.
I understand. Well, I have said the phrase cable news is an oxymoron. That's my opinion, contradiction in terms. It is opinion, sometimes masquerading as news. It could be it's basically talk radio on TV, or internet chatter on TV. It's a lot of opinion-based stuff. Everybody's going to want to know, after 53 years, Mitchell. Jeez. What's next for London Mitchell?
Well, I first off, I've been blessed with a career that I've just loved. And I've always loved radio. Jerry, not to say what I'm going to do in the future, because I really don't know, but I want to do a lot of volunteer work. I recently got an appointment from the city council to be on the Commission for Disabilities. I'm looking forward to working there. I think I'm going to try my hand at podcasting. I think that is something that's been suggested to me, and I may do that. I love to interview people, so that's probably the tack that I'll take.
Before we get out of here, since it hasn't come up, I'm going to bring it up. I'm also going to pay homage to a guy with whom I worked shoulder to shoulder in my radio days at WSPD. Felt pretty close to him. He was a mentor and just an icon. But geez, he was a lot closer to you. You know who I'm talking about, Lon Mitchell?
I know you're talking about Don Edwards, who I respect as a professional in the journalism and broadcasting field, second to none. But Don and I not only were fast friends, but he became my father-in-law.
Did you know that, folks? Don Edwards. Yeah, you married Don's daughter.
I did.
Don Edwards was London Mitchell's father-in-law. And you talk about one of the characters of broadcasting. There was one, right?
Well, that's another show in its entirety.
That is. We'll have to do another show on that. All right, London Mitchell, congratulations on a great run, and it's not done yet, folks. Keep your ears open. You'd be listening to podcasts. Everybody is, after all. Just to congratulate you on a great run, and thank you for what you've done in our community and will continue to do. Best to you, Lon.
You too, Jerry.
Thank you, my friend. I'll be right back.